Welcome, everyone. Let me know if you can hear me in the chat. Hopefully, my audio is working and everything is working well for us. It would be great to let me know just to confirm before we get too far started into our session this evening. Yes, thank you for letting me know. All right. So, thank you for joining me this evening. Please introduce yourself and let us know where in the world you're watching from if you haven't done that yet. I'm certified conscious uncoupling coach Jennifer Zundel, and conscious uncoupling coaching is based on the New York Times bestselling book titled Conscious Uncoupling, written by my mentor, Catherine Woodward Thomas, a licensed marriage and family therapist. And I've been working directly with her for 10 years now, over 10 years actually, one of her coaches certified to guide you through this process. And you may have heard of conscious uncoupling when back in 2014, Gwyneth Paltrow announced that she was conscious uncoupling from her husband, her former husband, Chris Martin, the lead singer of Coldplay. And at that time, what they were speaking about was this process that I'm going to be sharing with you tonight. So, this program is a program to support you through the end of a relationship in a healthy way for everyone involved so that you can heal your heart, reclaim your power, and create your own happily even afterlife. And so, I encourage you to silence your phones, close the other windows on your computer, and really just sit and listen to what I'm going to be sharing with you this evening because your desire for happy relationships matters. Your heart matters. And so this conversation is the perfect place for you to be. Whether the breakup or divorce just happened, or whether you're still in the process of deciding whether to continue in the relationship or not, it's the perfect place to be if the breakup happened many years ago and you've just been struggling to let it go and move forward in your life. Or maybe you've experienced a different kind of loss. And so this program can support you through other kinds of losses as well. So, in all of these situations, you might be experiencing big, overwhelming emotions as you're ending a relationship, not sure how you're going to be able to get to the other side of this and be happy again. Maybe you're worried about the future. Maybe you're worried about your children's future. And you might be wondering how to support yourself and your children so that you can move forward in the best way for everyone involved. So, no matter whether you're the one leaving the relationship or you're the one being left, most people who are going through a breakup, the ending of a relationship, tend to experiencing some version of the same things. And so, we're going to be talking about how to support yourself during this time so that you really feel empowered as you go through this process. And as we're getting started here, I'd like to share with you a little bit more about myself and how I came to be a conscious uncoupling coach. So I started working with Catherine Woodward Thomas as one of her Calling in the One coaches. So that's the other program created by Catherine that supports singles to manifest love. And so, through my own personal work in that program, and through supporting many clients through the program, wanting to find a partner, I've seen that sometimes we get into a relationship with someone that we think is the one, and we think it's a lifetime relationship, only to later be disappointed when it doesn't work out. And I can relate to that kind of disappointment myself. And I can also relate to staying too long in a relationship, trying to make it work, and feeling it was just really frustrating and confused about whether to stay or leave the relationship, and wondering if there was something maybe I could do differently to change the outcome and make it work. And so I can also relate to being devastated at the end of a relationship when it didn't work out and feeling that possibly it was just easier to be alone rather than risk that kind of heartache again. And so all of these are ways that we tend to get stuck in the past during a breakup. We get stuck and we close our hearts and we become defended against having something wonderful in our future. And these are all ways that we prevent ourselves from creating the kinds of relationships that we actually do want in our future. So we have to be mindful of how we're showing up, relating to what's happening right now as the relationship is ending, because this is what sets us up for what is going to happen in our future. And so this is what led me to become a conscious uncoupling coach, because it doesn't have to be this way, where we get stuck, we close our hearts, and we're fearful of the future, and we're fearful for our children's future or what the divorce might cause for them. So it doesn't have to be this way because conscious uncoupling can support you to move through the heart pain and support yourself to really return to a sense of wholeness so that you can move forwards and create happiness in your life going forwards. Create the kinds of relationships that you do want in your future. So let me give you an overview of what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to be looking at the current approach to breakups and divorce, and how our society generally approaches breakups, and why some of these approaches might lead you to make mistakes during a breakup. So, we're going to be talking about three mistakes that are very common during a breakup and what to do differently. So, I'm going to be giving you an overview of the five-step conscious uncoupling process, and I'll be sharing with you how you might practice. One of practices that I'm going to be sharing with you tonight, you might actually use if you're experiencing big, overwhelming emotions. And I'll be asking you as well to be generous with me and with your time this evening because I have so much to share with you. So you might plan to stay for an extra 10 minutes so that we can get through all this material that is really so helpful. And as we're going along tonight, if you have questions, put them in the chat because I'll make space at the end for a Q&A at the end, all right? So let me know in the chat if this sounds like it could support you this evening, all right? It is helpful if I get that kind of feedback during our time to let me know what's resonating for you, what you're needing support with, and what kinds of questions you have that I'm going to answer for you, all right? All right. So, first of all, I want to really presence here what is normal for people to experience during a breakup, right? It's very normal to experience big, overwhelming emotions and to feel like things are falling apart. Through the ending of this relationship, it might feel like your partner has betrayed you or abandoned you, but not only your partner, because it might also feel like life itself has abandoned you. What you thought you could count on is no longer there for you. The foundation that you thought you built is falling away. And so it might feel like everything that you could count on is no longer there for you. And it's understandable that the emotions and disappointment from the breakup might be extremely overwhelming and triggering for you. And we might even compare it to what you might experience during that of a car crash. Some car crashes might be a minor fender bender, and it can still leave us, though, feeling very triggered and disappointed. In a fender bender, it can still leave you feeling triggered by what happened, and it might cause us to close our hearts moving forwards. On the opposite extreme, some breakups might even feel like a hit and run that came out of nowhere. We didn't see it coming, and now the car is totaled, and we're left completely on our own in the hospital, possibly even paralyzed or needing physical therapy for the rest of our life. And so it might be the equivalent of learning that you were in a relationship with someone who maybe had a totally separate life, a secret family, and they never told you about that other family, that they were married to someone else as well the entire time, and you didn't know about it. Or maybe they were stealing money from your retirement accounts the entire time, and you didn't know it, and you only just found out about it. That level of betrayal is quite hard to take. The minor fender bender, on the other hand, might be something that's the equivalent of a disappointment in dating, where you've had a few dates with someone, you were really hopeful that this was going to go somewhere and become something meaningful, but then it didn't. And yes, that's disappointing, but on the scale of breakups, we're comparing that to a minor fender bender. And yes, it's still disappointing. And yes, it's still triggering. So you can see that there are all these levels between the two extremes, even, right? There's all the levels of trauma that you experience in a breakup between the minor fender bender of just the dating that didn't end up going anywhere, and now you're disappointed, versus the person that you were married to for years had a secret life the entire time. And now, no matter what level of these two extremes you've been experiencing, you're likely going to need some support to transform these experiences so that you're not really taken out and you don't close your heart in response. We have to see that whether it was a hit and run that came out of nowhere and now you're in the hospital needing physical therapy, or whether it was the disappointment, there are things that we all need to understand are normal during a breakup. And yet we also need to understand that in order to really heal and get through this and regain a sense of wholeness and find yourself again, find some stability for yourself again, the reality is that you're going to need some support, the proper type of support. For example, if you were in that car crash and now you're in the hospital with a broken leg, of course, you would be getting support from appropriate doctors, right? You wouldn't sit at home and try to heal it yourself. You wouldn't sit at home and say, oh, I think time is just going to take care of this. Time heals all wounds, right? I don't think you would do that. You would get support. You would get the appropriate medical support so that you can, that the reality here is that in this breakup, there's just a different part of your system that's broken. It's your heart that's broken this time. And so we need to look at how to properly heal our hearts so that you're not walking around paralyzed with a limp forever, so that you're not closing your heart and living a lesser life than you actually are capable of living. All right. And the reality is that our children actually do better during a divorce than expected. Research shows that the deciding factor for how well children do is based on how the couple relates to each other and how they relate to the children during the breakup. And that's what influences how the children interpret what's happening. So we have to be mindful of how we're showing up in front of the children and the message that we're giving the children. So I want to share with you a testimonial from Chelsea, who recently followed up with me about her experience of going through conscious uncoupling with me. And she has a daughter, and she was very worried about how her daughter would respond to the divorce and the experience of that. So she said to me, my daughter is thriving, and I'm proud of how my former partner and I have handled the hiccups of co-parenting. I'm still dating the new man I met earlier this year, and our relationship has been slow but steady, which is very different than how I was with men in the past, and it's a good thing. And I'm also buying a business. And later this month, I close on the store that I've worked at for the last several years. And I'm thrilled to own my own business. All of these are a result of the work that I did with you. Thank you for helping me grow out of the destructive patterns and into the more confident woman that I am now. So this program has the potential to radically support you to show up and create the life that you actually do want going forwards. And your children can thrive just like Chelsea's daughter is thriving now. And this really can influence every area of your life, just like it did for Chelsea, who's now feeling so much more confident that she's even really stepping into her dream life of owning a business. The reality is that this breakup can actually be an opportunity for you. This deep emotional turmoil that you might be experiencing at the end of this relationship is actually an opportunity to discover and transform what we call your source fracture story in the Conscious Uncoupling program. Now, this source fracture story is really the original wound that you may have experienced growing up in your family or in response to something earlier in your life as a child, maybe at school, maybe with your caregivers, but probably this story has been going and following you through your entire life. It's probably been showing up in various ways throughout all your relationships. The experiencing that you're having now in this current breakup is part of that larger pattern. This pain that you're experiencing of the dynamic from the current breakup that's ending, it's probably not the first time that you felt this way. Am I right? You've probably felt this type of pain before. It's probably part of a much larger pattern that goes back to childhood, a pattern possibly of people leaving you, not being there for you, not respecting you, not listening to you, not caring about your feelings and needs, not making you a priority. These are just some of the examples of the types of patterns that we tend to carry with us from relationship to relationship. And so this breakup now that you're involved in is one of the biggest opportunities that you've had to finally transform this and to heal this deeply held part of yourself and your experience in your relationships so that you can transform it and you can be liberated from it and free yourself from the pattern. So you don't need to keep repeating it in your next relationship, in your future relationship. This is an opportunity for you to really step into the potential that you have to create the kind of happiness that you do want in your relationships. Now, it's also important to know that current statistics show that 50% of first marriages end in divorce, and over 60% of second marriages, and 70% of third marriages end in divorce. And yet, while these statistics show that divorce is common, our society still tends to view the ending of a marriage as a failure. And so it's really time to evolve how we're looking at breakups and what divorce and the meaning that we're making about them, because the reality shows that divorce is common. And so it's time to actually learn instead how to move through the ending of a breakup in a healthy way so that we're growing and we're using this opportunity to actually create what you do want in your future. And that's what's possible right now. That's what's possible through the ending of this relationship that you might be experiencing. So it's time to learn how to have a healthy breakup rather than continuing to perpetuate unhealthy breakups. The reality is if we can learn how to do this, you're going to set yourself up for your next relationship to be even better. My mentor, Catherine Woodward Thomas, says your next relationship doesn't start when you meet your next person. It starts here right now with how you're ending this one. Because any unhealed residue that you're carrying from this relationship, resentments, triggers, fear of repeating the same pattern, it's all going to show up in your next relationship if you don't look at it now and heal it. And so if your heart remains closed out of fear of repeating those things, that causes you to get more of that dynamic again, right? And it causes us to carry those patterns into the next relationship. But instead, you could choose to grow the skills and the perspective to consciously end this in a healthy way so that those new skills and new perspectives carry over into the next relationship. Again, the problem is as a collective society, we haven't known how to have a healthy breakup that supports healthy completion for everybody to thrive moving forwards. We haven't known how to create greater levels of happiness in our relationships. And so in the aftermath of a breakup, we haven't known how to support the children to feel loved. We haven't known how to create support structures so that everybody feels supported to thrive. We haven't known how to trust ourselves to do something differently going forwards. We haven't known how to do these things. And so today I'd like to give you some guidance about how we can start to set this right so that you can create a healthy breakup, which will support you to create happiness in your future relationships. All right. So let's talk about 3 mistakes that people tend to make during a breakup. Mistake number 1 is going from soulmate to soul hate. It's very easy to start devaluing the other person that you had a relationship with and devalue them by even hating them, speaking badly about them. And in some ways, there's a good reason for that. There's a good reason that people are doing this. And the good reason is that people are trying to come to terms with the loss of the relationship. In an unconscious way, they're attempting to break the emotional attachment with their partner. And so, in some ways, this emotional attachment that we have with a partner during a breakup feels a little bit like the withdrawal from an addiction because the same chemicals in the body are being triggered during a breakup as someone might experience during a withdrawal from drugs, from withdrawal from alcohol. It's the same chemicals that are being activated in the body. It's the same hormones. And so we want to see that these hormones internally are all out of balance and they're causing us to feel out of control. And it's very overwhelming for people. But the challenge here is that we know we need to break this attachment bond, but we don't know how to do it. And so unconsciously, people are turning towards hating the partner, which is only contributing to more unstable feelings and more overwhelm. But the reality here is that it's doing more damage than good because it's preventing real healing from happening. And so it causes us, when we're in that dynamic, It's also contributing to us not being able to trust ourselves. It's contributing to us not trusting our hearts. And it causes us to close down our hearts and not be available for future happiness. And in the end, we end up crippling ourselves even more for our future. Let's talk about mistake number two. Mistake number two is blaming the partner. It's very easy to blame the partner, right? It's very easy to see how the partner did some horrible things. And yet, if we're truly honest, we also had a part in what happened. And I'm pretty sure that we also did some pretty not nice things, right? If we're really honest. And so we have to really, instead of focusing on blaming the partner, right? That leaves you no power when you're doing that. No power to create anything differently. You've given your power away in that dynamic. Your power to create something meaningful, to create lasting change. And yet, most of us really do want to see our parts. We really do want to try to self-reflect. But the problem is that when we do that, we also are tending to do it in a way where we blame or shame ourselves then. And there's no power there either. There's no way to create anything differently. And so we have to start to reflect on ourselves in new ways, in ways that actually could give us some insight into what to do differently. For example, we want to really look at how we are asking ourselves questions as we're trying to figure out what happened and how we got here and what our part was, right? So we have to start to see what are some good questions to ask. For example, a good question might be, what can I learn from this experience? What can I learn and apply differently going forwards? Or another question might be, what was my part in creating this dynamic that didn't work for me? What can I be responsible for here so that I can make new choices in my future? You see, that is a way of reflecting that is very self-responsible. It's not taking over responsibility for things that aren't your part, but it's actually full willing, 100% willing to take responsibility for what is my part and make new choices going forwards, right? So we have to start to see, what does it look like really to take full self-responsibility for your part? It might be acknowledging the ways that you ignored your own intuition, or you were noticing some red flags that you didn't pay attention to. It might be noticing where you gave your power away in the relationship. It might be noticing where you didn't set appropriate boundaries, or where you didn't speak up for yourself, or where you were over functioning and over giving because you really wanted the other person to like you and you really wanted it to work. See, these are some examples, very real, concrete examples is what we're looking for here, right? And so these are some of the things that, I might even be saying here. Some of these things, you might even see them as a good thing, right? So, for example, if you're a very giving person, we tend to imagine that that's a good thing. It's good to be generous, right? And yet, it might be pretty sneaky. It might be pretty sneaky because we have to start to see, are there ways that you were giving because you wanted to convince them to love you? Because you wanted to get them to reciprocate, because you wanted to get something back from them. So sometimes the ways that we're giving are really not very wholesome. And so we have to see here, the challenge here is likely that we were setting someone up to disappoint us and take us for granted. And how exactly did we do that? And what was motivating us to do that? See, when we see it very, very clearly, these things might seem like they're minor. They are not minor. They are not a small thing. We are training someone how to treat us. And these ways of showing up set the tone for the entire relationship. So until we see it clearly, we can't trust ourselves. We truly can't trust ourselves to do something differently and create happy love going forwards. And this is what causes us to close our hearts because we're afraid we don't know how to do it differently. We're afraid of getting in similar dynamics again. So we have to really, really get honest and reflect in ways about how we set them up to play out our story with us. Because, like I said, these patterns that we've been experiencing in our relationships, this probably isn't the first time that you felt this way. We could trace this back to a much earlier time in your life. And we have to see that what's probably been motivating our choices and our actions is that we have to set things right with ourselves first We have to see how we showed up in ways that were not aligned with the relationship that we truly want. So let's move on to mistake number three here. Mistake number three is thinking that time heals everything. The reality is time does not heal everything. Like I said before, if you had a broken leg, you wouldn't sit at home thinking that time would heal it, right? I don't think anyone here on the call would do that, right? And so the reality is you would be going to get appropriate support. You would be getting support from people who know how to heal a broken leg, right? And the reality is that healing a broken heart also needs the right kind of support. Nobody wants to break their leg. And yet, if you have, you need to go to a doctor, you need to get x-rays, you need to have the doctor assess the break, what type of break it is, where the break is, and you need a cast put on it possibly, or maybe one of those walking boots or something like this, right? Maybe you need to go to physical therapy. You wouldn't try to fix it at home by yourself. This is a process that actually takes the type of support that is going to actually fix the broken leg so that you don't walk around with a limp for the rest of your life. And here's the reality here. Relationships that don't end consciously don't end at all. And so if you're not committed to healing the broken heart, then that relationship will show up in your future relationships because we carry around the energy of that relationship into the next relationship. And it causes our hearts to be defended against love. It causes our hearts to not be fully open. And so then we still get involved in the same patterns, the same dynamics that we've been carrying around our entire lives, causing us to show up as a lesser version of ourselves because we aren't really fully available for the type of relationship that we do want and what's required in that relationship, right? We're not fully available and we're giving away our true power. We're dimming our lights because we're really not authentic anymore in that way. So I want to share with you what you can do instead, right? If we're not going to be doing those three mistakes, what would we do instead? So let's do a high level overview of the 5-step conscious uncoupling process. And so the first step, step number one, is to find emotional freedom from those big overwhelming emotions. It's very normal, as I said, that these big overwhelming feelings might feel like they're in charge, right? It might feel anger, sadness, disappointment, grief, betrayal. It might feel as if they're in charge of you and you're not in charge. And it might lead you to act out in ways that are not helpful. And so instead, we have to learn how to harness the energy of these emotions so that they're contained and there's a sense of safety that you're creating for yourself here, so that you're not overwhelmed or distracted by the feelings. And instead, you're able to focus on what truly matters and make the choices that are best for you, best for everyone involved. And so that you can behave in ways that actually do create what you want, rather than behaving in ways where you don't even recognize yourself and they're coming out destructively, right? So we want to see that there's a way that you can honor these emotions in a constructive way and use them for good. There is a way that you can use these emotions for good. So I want to share with you here what Beverly said after going through the conscious uncoupling process. She said, since doing the program, the anger and resentment is gone. All the pain from everything is gone. And that's how powerful this can be. That you can really just let it all go once you truly get connected to your power again, and you can create a container for these emotions here. So I'd like to briefly guide you through a practice here that might support you with holding and containing some of the emotions you might be feeling right now. And so this is a containment practice, and it's actually called the inner sanctuary of safety. And it's combined with a Tonglen practice, which is a Buddhist practice. And so I'm going to be combining these two practices here to support you to create a sense of safety regarding big, overwhelming emotions. And it's a closed eyes practice, almost like a meditation in a way. All right. So if you're in a place where it's safe to do so, I invite you to put everything to one side and close your eyes, leaning back in the chair that's supporting you. Taking a big deep breath and scanning your body, noticing all the feelings and sensations. If you find any tension, just see if you can breathe into that area and let it go. And now I invite you to imagine your most powerful self that shows up at your best when other people need you. For example, if you have children, imagine how you show up when your children need you. Imagine how you show up when a friend needs your support. Find that part of yourself that actually does know that you're connected to support, that you do have power, the part of you that knows that you are resilient, wise, and capable and strong. And allow this sense of yourself to fill your entire body, even extending out to the edges of the room, filling up the space with your energy. And now imagine that there's another part of you coming to sit down next to you. And turning towards that part with care and compassion, extending a sense of presence for what they're experiencing right now. And asking that other self, what are you feeling right now? Listening for their answer and letting them name one emotion, just one emotion I'm feeling. And coming back to this higher self, the wiser self, and mirroring back to them, I can see that you're feeling. Naming that emotion again. And asking, what else are you feeling? Letting them name one more emotion. And coming back to the higher self and mirroring back again. I can see that you're feeling, and naming that emotion. And asking, what else are you feeling? Letting them name one more emotion. Coming back to the higher self and mirroring back, I can see that you're feeling. Naming that emotion one more time. On the next in-breath, imagine that you could breathe that emotion into your heart so that you're turning towards it rather than trying to get away from it. And letting it transform in your heart. And on the out-breath, imagine that you're floating above the world and you could see everyone in the world in this very minute who feels this exact same way as you do. And imagine that you could send out a blessing to everyone, including yourself in that blessing. On the next in-breath, breathing in another emotion that you named, letting it transform in your heart. And on the out-breath, imagining everyone in the world who feels this exact same way for the very same reason as you do. And sending out a blessing to everyone, including yourself in that blessing. On the next in-breath, breathing in that third emotion that you named, letting it transform in your heart. And on the out-breath, imagine that you could breathe out a blessing to everybody in the world who feels that exact same way for the very same reason as you do, including yourself in that blessing. Now coming back to extend your attention to the other self sitting next to you and asking that other self, what do you need right now? And letting them name one need, I need. Coming back to this higher self and mirroring back to them, I can see that you need, and name that need again. And then asking them one more time, what else do you need? Letting them name one more need. And coming back to the higher self and mirroring back, I can see that you need, and naming that need again. And now letting this other self know that you're here for them. You're listening. They can come here anytime they need your support. You have their back. They can count on you. And then taking a deep breath. And when you're ready, opening your eyes and coming back to the call with me. And so I would love to know what your experience was of this practice. I would love if you put that in the chat and share it with us. It's a very powerful experience, I think, for many people, right? Holding that container of safety for yourself to really experience what's going on for you, what you're feeling, what you're needing, and also seeing that you're not alone in experiencing that. Whatever you're experiencing is very normal. And of course, you need whatever it is that you named that you need. Of course, you need that. So, this is important, right? And here's the thing that you need to know: as long as you're feeling victimized by the other person in this relationship, your former partner, then you're at the effect of them. They're the one in power as long as you're feeling victimized. So it's time to take our power back. It's time to take our power back. And so in order to do that, we have to start to see what our part was in this dynamic. And so that's where we move into step 2 of conscious uncoupling. Step 2 is where we start to see what was motivating the choices that we made, the actions that we took. And we have to see very clearly what was going on, right? And we're not discounting that the other person did some horrible things, did some crappy things. I get that. We're not discounting that. We're not ignoring that. And yet, even if the other person was 97% at fault, and it's very clear, maybe for example, the other person had an affair, right? It's very clear to see that the other person did something awful. And yet, if you want to take your power back, then even if it's 97% the other person's fault, we have to put all of our attention on your 3% and see what your part was in contributing to that dynamic. This is how you get your power back, putting 100% of your attention here, right? Once we see what our part was very clearly, once we see what was motivating us to make those choices that we did and do the things that we did, maybe, for example, we were overgiving because we wanted to prove our value. Maybe we were ignoring red flags because we really wanted it to work out and we really liked the person. Maybe we were trying to prove that we were worthy of being loved. Maybe we wanted to prove ourselves. Maybe we just wanted to step out of this pattern and we really wanted to let someone know how hard we were trying because maybe then they would try too, right? And so really what's going on in all of these types of ways of showing up is that we're involved in codependent dynamics still, despite all the work that we've been doing, right? There are ways that we have to start to see how we've been responsible for what happened, and we have to make an amends to ourselves first of all, to set things right with ourselves first. Sometimes we also need to make an amends to a partner. If we did things that hurt a partner, if there's things that we can see that we're responsible in ways that we hurt our partner, that could be appropriate to make an amends to our partner as well. However, we also really need to set things right with ourselves. so that we can trust ourselves again. So I want to share with you another testimonial from someone who did the Conscious Uncoupling program with me. And she said, I want to say that this was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. I feel like I can finally move on in my relationships and break the pattern that has plagued me for the past decade. I saw my part in these relationship dynamics clearly, and I can take full responsibility for it. And I now have the tools to create the relationship that I do want with a future partner. Exactly. Exactly. That's what we're doing here is we're giving you the tools to really trust yourself again, to really see what your part was clearly so that you know exactly what to do differently going forwards. So I mentioned a minute ago that sometimes when we see our part, when we see all the time, that we did something that wasn't in our best interest, we also have to check in what was motivating me to do those things? What was motivating my choices and the ways that I show up that didn't help this relationship? So it's very possible when we see what was motivating you to do those things that weren't in your best interest, possibly, for example, trying to prove yourself, trying to prove your value, trying to prove your worthiness and get them to love you, just as an example. These are all examples of your source fracture story. Because step three in conscious uncoupling is about transforming your source fracture story. First of all, seeing it clearly and then transforming it so that you don't need to continue to play it out, right? So that we're really grounded in our true and authentic value, our true worthiness to create a great relationship and have a partner show up for us and mirror back to us our true value, right? And when we're centered there, we don't need a partner to respond to us in a certain way to validate us or make us feel worthy. Because what liberates us here is when we are centered in our value, right? And I know I hear this from a lot of clients that they've been doing a lot of self work already. And that's very great, especially, if you're doing a lot of work on your own. Maybe you're doing self help programs, you're reading self help books, you're meditating, you're really centered in your value, for example, with your friends or at work. Right? That you can show up in ways that you feel centered in your value in those ways. And yet, when it comes to your romantic relationships, that's where you still struggle. I hear that a lot. And the reason for that is because the romantic relationships are the ones that are going to trigger us the most. Those are the ones that matter the most. Those are the ones where we're expecting this to be a lifetime love. And these are high stakes relationships, right? And so those are the ones that are going to trigger us the most. And so these are the ones that we want to put all of our attention on being able to show up in our value. Okay? So, really, step three is about transforming your source fracture story so that you are centered in your value and you're liberated. You're liberated and you don't need to continue to play out those stories anymore. Right? Again, we can trace this source fracture story back to your youth, when you were in relationships and now, getting triggered in those relationships earlier from parents, from people at school, from early dating experiences where you felt disappointed and triggered. And now you're in a relationship as an adult and you're thinking, finally, this person is going to be able to show up and give me what I need, right? And we think that finally we're going to be able to have this great relationship. And yet, what we're seeing is that we're still getting triggered. We're still generating more of the story that we've been inside of our entire life. And we have to see how we set our partner up to disappoint us. How did we do that? And so we have to look for here with the source fracture story, we have to look for the meaning that we have made and the meaning that we have assigned to what's been happening in this relationship. And then we have to see what's really true because the meaning that we've been making is very likely the source fracture meaning. It's not true, right? This belief that you have to prove your worthiness, that you have to prove your value, that you need to somehow get them to like you, right? So I want to share with you an example of this because I think sometimes it's easier to understand things when we have examples. So I had a client who came to work with me, Susan. Susan came to work with me and she was going through a divorce and she was very depressed. She was having a hard time getting out of bed even because she was so depressed. She was having a hard time taking care of her kids because she was so depressed. And the reality is that she had been married to a man who was in the military, and so he kept uprooting their family to take them wherever his job sent them. And so she felt like it was just her job, to take care of everyone else. And she had to put her needs on the back burner. In fact, she felt like she couldn't even have any needs or dreams or desires because everyone else's needs and desires mattered more, right? Her husband's job mattered more than anything she had a desire for. Her kids and what they needed mattered more than anything that she had a desire for. Right? She felt like she could never put down roots anywhere. She could never create a foundation of friends and things that really served her in life because her husband was the priority here and the kids were the priority, right? And so that was the dynamic that she was living in this marriage. And now they're going through a divorce and she's really depressed because everything that she had been making her priority in life is now also falling apart and there's just nothing there for her, right? So we found here, once we got to this source fracture story step, we saw here, I took her through a process that I guide clients through to name your source fracture story at the energetic level of your body, because that's where this source fracture story is living here. And we saw that she had this belief that she was a mistake and she wasn't supposed to be here. And so she couldn't have anything good because other people were supposed to be here. And so she couldn't take away anything good from them because they're supposed to be here, but she wasn't. So that source fracture story, that meaning that she was making of her life, was what caused her to get into a relationship with an unavailable man who never made her a priority, who never listened to her, who never really valued anything that she could give. And so we saw as well that we could trace that story back to her mother growing up. In fact, she saw very clearly how it originated even. This might sound strange, but she saw as a baby, I felt that. I felt my mother holding her distance from me, not loving me. And the reality was is that Susan saw that it was because her mother loved her so much that she was afraid. She was overwhelmed with love for Susan, and she didn't know how to manage this love for her daughter, and so she just distanced herself. And Susan, as a baby, energetically interpreted that as this must mean I'm a mistake. I'm not supposed to be here. And so she grew up her entire life making everything and everyone else a priority and trying to prove that she had a right to exist in the world. Now, who wouldn't be depressed if they thought they were a mistake, right? So you see, this gets very deep, where we get to the root of what's been driving your relationships and how you've been showing up in your relationships in ways that are not helpful, in ways that are only guaranteeing that people take you for granted, don't prioritize you, don't care about you, cheat on you, betray you, don't love you. We want to see it clearly because once we see the source fracture story clearly and we let your body name it, we can see also very clearly how it's causing you to show up in your relationships in ways that are not creating what you want. In fact, it's creating the exact opposite of what you want, right? Because the reality for Susan is she would never make her dreams a priority. She would never share them with people. She would never tell people what she felt or what she needed or what was going on for her internally, ever. So she left that one session and she went home and she shared with her mother what she was learning. And for the first time ever, her mother listened. Ever. The first time ever. She came back the next week, Susan, a changed woman, and told me about the hour-long conversation that she had with her mother, where her mother was listening and caring about what Susan had to share. Susan started showing up differently in her life. She started sharing her feelings, her needs, her desires with people as if they mattered. And people started listening. They started actually inviting her to share more. and including her and caring about her and making her a priority because of this one conversation that changed everything. That's how powerful this is, right? It caused her to change her life, this one conversation. So I want to share with you another testimonial here from my client. And this woman is a therapist herself. And actually, it's very normal that many therapists actually come to work with me. And so this woman was a therapist, and she told me, so here's her testimonial. Before working with Jennifer, I had been going to another therapist, but I wasn't really getting help with my breakup. I was struggling with managing my emotions and what I was making the breakup mean. And Jennifer helped me take a deep dive into my source fracture story to discover my false beliefs and create powerful new truth statements to see what was really true about those false statements. She led me to my strong, resilient self, capable of knowing the truth of my value and who I am. And I can't imagine being where I am now without the conscious uncoupling coaching that I did with Jennifer. And so that was my client, Jody. All right. So moving on to step 4, we want to start to see that what's been happening in our past up until now, right? We've seen how we've contributed to these dynamics, and now we've cleared out some space. Now we're actually ready to create a life that you do want going forwards. And so we want to start to see, what is that future that you want? How do you want to start to show up differently? Let's create some clarity about the new choices that you're going to be taking, the new actions that you're going to be making. And we want to start to create a vision for the life that you do want, whether that's with a future love or whether it's with the former partner and now you need to be happy co-parents, or maybe you share a business together, or maybe you have a community of friends together and you want to create a community that still supports both of you to be happy and belong in your community, right? Or maybe it's a partner that you're not going to see again, but you still want to be mindful of how you're thinking about that partner going forwards, right? This is really a stand for the future that you want to create moving forwards. Maybe you have children, and so we have to start to create a future that's healthy for your children. So once we get to step 4, now we're starting to look at the future. And how do we create that future? And who will we be in response to this breakup? In response to the ending of this relationship? Who are we choosing to be? Right? And how do we co-parent? How do we move forwards in a way that create the kind of relationships that we do want going forwards? So Heather from the UK was one of my clients, and she said, I feel so freed from the dynamics of my past relationship, and I can see now my part in the things that happened and how I can do something differently in my relationships. Jennifer is a wonderful coach. She's very kind, very thorough, and supportive, picking up the fine detail in our work together that would help me feel a different woman, right? So I want to acknowledge that we are at the end of the scheduled time, and yet I still have more to share with you. So if you're able to stay on for another 10 minutes, that would be wonderful. And then I will take some questions at the end, all right? So let's talk about step 5. Step 5 is about creating your happily even after, right? So we want to start to see that there were very likely some agreements that were in place when you were a couple that are no longer appropriate. And so we have to be mindful about the new agreements that you want to set in place going forwards. Again, whether that's new agreements with a former partner who you now are co-parents with, or friends you have shared friends with, or you work together with, or you want to create new agreements for your future relationship and how you're going to do things differently going forwards. We want to be mindful that we're creating conscious agreements that will set everyone up to thrive moving forwards. We also want to have there's a wonderful ritual in step 5 that I so love guiding people through because it really is meaningful. It's a very sacred closing, almost like the opposite of a wedding ceremony, where it's very sacred ritual for closing the relationship and having you feel liberated in a way that blesses and honors you and the time that you spent together with your partner. So we want to start to see how we can set you up to create this kind of healthy ending of this relationship, right? And so this is what's possible as you're ending your relationship, right? This is what's possible. And so I would love to share with you that I do have a few openings for new clients right now, private clients who are looking to get some one-on-one high-level support to radically and quickly change things in your relationships to support you through this transition so that you don't keep repeating the same patterns of your past. And so I'm going to be sharing with you a link to my calendar where you can set up a consultation with me, and the consultations are reserved for people who are seriously looking to get some support and ready to invest in themselves as well if we discover it's a good fit. All right. And so I do want to let you know as well that I am offering a discount, 10% off of my coaching services to those who are looking to get support before Saturday, March 29th. And so if you're attending this call, this 10% discount is reserved for people attending this call. And if you book a consultation with me before Saturday, March 29th, and sign up for a coaching package with me, then I will be offering 10% off of my coaching service. And so I want to give you a little bit more information about the Conscious Uncoupling program. So a lot of people wonder whether it is reserved for couples or if it's for individuals. And so really it's good to know that the program was created for individuals going through a breakup. And there are some reasons for that. One of the reasons, as I've been explaining here, is steps 1, 2, and 3 in this 5-step process is all about you. It's all about you holding space for your emotions and creating that container like that practice that we did here tonight, creating the container for your emotions, learning the tools about how to hold space for your emotions. And then we're also really getting a lot of clarity about your part in the dynamic of what happened. What are you going to be responsible for creating? What was motivating your choices and your actions that you contributed to in the relationship, and how can you start to make an amends to yourself so that you can trust yourself going forwards. We also want to do a deep dive into the source fracture story that you may have been perpetuating through all your relationships that was generating your experience in your relationships. And we want to start to see how we can transform that source fracture story. So that is all self-work. That's not couples work, right? Now, step 4 and 5, we are giving you tools to bring into your relationships, how to have conversations with partners, especially when things are challenging. And so sometimes I do work with couples sometimes. And if we do work with couples, you're still doing individual work in the beginning so that we're getting a lot of clarity about how to set things right with yourself, most importantly, and then how to set things right with a partner, how to set things right with future partners. And so there are ways to bring in a partner if your partner, your former partner wants to go through the program with you. There are ways to work that in. And yet at the end of the day, it's also individual work as well. All right. So also be putting I want to invite you to put your questions in the chat if you have questions for me about things that I've shared here, right? And then I also want to be addressing some common questions that come up. So one of them is what I just shared here. A lot of people ask me, is this for couples or is it for individuals? And so I think I've answered that. It's really both, right? I mean, it's for individuals, but there are ways to incorporate your partner if they're also interested. All right. And yet here's the thing you need to know. Your partner doesn't need to do this in order for you to have radical transformation in the relationship. Maybe your partner is resistant or defensive, or maybe it's just not a good fit for them. And that's okay because you can still transform. Even if you're going to be co-parenting with that person, there are ways for you to transform this dynamic, even when just one person is doing this program. Isn't that great news? That's really good news, right? And so we have to start to see here some of the ways that we've been setting up people to disappoint us and take responsibility for that. Another question that people often ask me when they're going through a breakup is if there's a right time to do this program. And the reality here is that if you're experiencing something that led you to this call, then you're probably in a space where this program could serve you, right? Maybe you're still feeling triggered by a past breakup that you just haven't gotten over. Or maybe you're on the fence about staying or leaving a relationship and you're thinking, well, maybe we could still work it out, right? Or maybe you have decided to leave, but you're not finalized the divorce process yet. Or maybe you have finalized the divorce process yet, and yet there's still this part of you that hasn't let it go. Or maybe now you're trying to figure out how to co-parent with this person. All of these, this program can support you in all of these ways, right? No matter where you're at in the process of your breakup, it can support you. Now, as well, even if you decide that you want to stay with this person and you want to get back together with them, this program, there's an aspect of the program called conscious recoupling. Because if you're going to stay with them, what we have to know here is that there are things that weren't working. And if we're not going to resolve those things that weren't working, then we're only guaranteed to keep repeating those things. So we have to start to see that we have to uncouple from the dynamics that weren't working so that we can choose a new way of going forwards. That's why we're calling it conscious recoupling, so that you can choose the relationship that you do want to mindfully create going forwards. So this program can support you with that as well. Now, some people, still going back to the question that I just presented, is there a right time to do the breakup? So if someone's going through a divorce, then ideally they're going to do this program before they divide assets. And the reason for that is because the program will support you to go into that conversation very differently than you would if you hadn't done this program yet. It will support you to go into that conversation centered in your value, centered in your worth, where you're not pulling on the other person to validate you in some way through how they're showing up in that conversation. And when you're showing up centered in your value, that conversation is going to go much better. It's also going to support you to go into that conversation really wanting the best for your partner as well, wanting the best for yourself and your partner and everyone involved. And when you're showing up with that level of intention, it's going to support everything to go better. All right. And yet, if you're if you're already divorced and you've already divided assets, then the best time to get support is where you are right now. That's really, at the end of the day, the best answer here. The best support is when you need it, right? That's the best time to get support is when you need it. All right. So I'm wondering, again, I want to put out that invitation for any questions. If anyone has questions about anything I've shared, go ahead and put them in the chat and I will be taking questions. Um, some people ask me, how long is the program? So the program is created as a 6-week program, though I tend to offer it as 12 weeks of coaching. And my reason for that is because these are big things. These are big conversations. And we can do it in 6 weeks if that's what you're needing. I can adjust to make that happen. However, I find that that is, quite, we have to be super focused, right? We have to be very focused when we're doing 6 weeks, whereas 12 weeks gives us more space. There's more spaciousness for me to really support you and to go really deep so that we don't feel rushed, is what I find works best. The sessions do happen on Zoom. People ask me about that. And so I'm just going to look here for any questions that have come in and see if there's anything I can answer. So Tiffany responded about the practice that we did, the inner sanctuary of safety practice, that you felt heartbroken, scared, and tired. I get it. And that's normal. That's very normal. right? And so you're needing support and guidance. So the first place to get support and guidance is with yourself through that practice that I gave you, offering yourself some compassion, letting yourself know that you're here for yourself. And I would encourage you to, reach out and book a consultation with me because it sounds like the program could support you very much based on what you're experiencing and where you're at. I have worked with many people through conscious uncoupling, and when they come in, a lot of times they're very overwhelmed. Sometimes they tell me that they're having trouble eating, they're having trouble focusing at work, they're having trouble sleeping, and that's very normal. And so we have to start to see how we can create some stabilize you and feel create more balance for yourself right now so that you can show up through this process in a way that will really support you and have you feel supported through this time. It's an important time to feel supported. All right. And it sounds like Heather feels the same way as Tiffany does. And um, Barbie felt abandoned, unsafe, and unloved. Yes, I get that. I get that a lot. I hear that. And the same thing, Barbie, if you're still here, I see you on the call here still as well. So again, the place to start is showing up for yourself by doing the practice that I gave you. And I encourage you to reach out and book a consultation because I think the program could support you as well to find your own power through this, right? Reclaim your power, heal your hearts, and create the future that you want going forwards. And then we had another person who felt sad, forgotten, and not valued, forgotten about. Yes, I get that. I understand. All right. So I want to let you know that you're going to be added to my email list as well. We've come to the end of our time here, and you're going to be added to my email list. So do keep an eye out. I do offer support in various ways, and I'm going to really enjoy connecting with you going forwards and having you in my community. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me this evening. I look forward to connecting with you again very soon. Bye for now.